Hello everybody, welcome back to another episode of Mind Over Mania. My name's Christina and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today I decided to do something a little bit different since I've been doing a lot of pick-a-group readings, and I decided that I wanted to introduce a couple videos of me just monologuing and talking about a couple different topics. This is similar in vein to kind of what I was doing with my podcast before, but I would like to kind of integrate some of the spiritual aspects as well as what I've learned in general to give you guys some practical advice for your situation, because honestly right now there's a lot of things going on between what I'm seeing in the readings, what I've been experiencing, and what I've been seeing a lot with my friends, and I felt that it was time that I kind of branch away from doing just the pick-a-group readings and give you guys just some straight-up advice, because while everyone has their own situation, and depending on how you feel about tarot card readings or just the nature of what your issue is, I wanted to make a video that was a little bit more encompassing of practical application, solutions and advice, as opposed to just giving tarot card readings. So that way it doesn't limit my audience to just the tarot card spiritual group. I am a person that I believe in listening to science as well as using my intuition, and also just I have a lot of personal experience with overcoming some heavy things. If you've listened to some of my podcast videos prior to when I first started my channel, go ahead and check those out. But as I've revealed previously, I've seen some things and I have a lot of good advice that I feel would be beneficial to be shared with a bunch of you, especially during these hard times between COVID, a lot of the political discourse going on right now, as well as whatever the heck is going on in the universe that is making everything so batshit insane right now. So without further ado, the topic I want to talk about today is overcoming inner conflict and finding yourself again. I feel that this is a topic that can relate to almost every one of us who, at some point or another, we've gotten away from what truly makes us our authentic self. With a lot of the things that are going on right now, people are really having a hard time finding their place in the world. Things are being upended. The political dynamic has changed so tremendously, as well as the economic standpoint of what it means to have a job and how important is it in your day-to-day life, as well as, is it fulfilling to you, or is it, maybe something that's like a scourge on your existence, or maybe you don't really know what's going on or how to find yourself again, especially with the rise of social media. A lot of people are struggling with anxiety and depression in record numbers. And those of you that have seen previously, when it came to my charity live stream, suicide is a big deal, and it's a topic that is really important to me. And seeing so many people that are struggling right now, even if they don't explicitly say it, there's a lot of people that have really lost finding themselves amongst all of the chaos and pain of just our everyday world. I want to talk about some of my own personal experiences and ways that have helped me cope, as well as what I've seen work for other people. I want to keep this as general as possible, specifically because so many people go through things differently, and I hope that by watching this video, you can take away a new, fresh perspective of looking at yourself. And my goal is to help you find ways of being able to go inside and be able to see things for what they are and not get so caught up in the nasty negative talk or getting lost and finding out what is real, what's not real, what's me, what's not me. Especially for those of you that tend to be a little bit more on the intuitive side, it's really difficult being able to determine what is my voice, what is the voice of someone else I'm picking up on, what is a voice that maybe is something out in the ether, what is real. It's really difficult, and I myself am currently going on that journey, so I can at least share with you what I've learned so far, and as I continue to record this channel, I'll gain more and more insight and share that with you guys as I learn myself. So I guess for starters, I would like to talk about one thing when it comes to inner conflict and being able to identify your inner self and going deep within. The first aspect you should really focus on when you're doing any kind of inner work is determining what is you and what is external to you. So I know that's a very broad statement, but it's something that you really need to start taking into consideration whenever you're starting to listen to your thoughts, your feelings, and being able to judge your own perception of reality. Part of the reason why I said this is because, for one thing, a majority of what makes you up as a person is a combination of what you've inherited from your family, as well as your experiences around you, and just what naturally makes you as a person and what makes you within your soul and your own space. So being able to determine what are pieces of you that are authentically your inner voice, as well as what is something that may be an echo of somebody else, is super critical when it comes to being able to track down the noise, especially when you're trying to identify an inner problem. So, for example, for those of you that deal with depression or anxiety, oftentimes what happens is a lot of these internal voices are voices of people that we've inherited over time. So even our grandparents or great-grandparents, things that have happened to them, they run in families. Why else do you think that depression, anxiety, other mental disorders run in families? There's a reason for that. I can go into the whole spiritual side of things, but I'm only going to lightly touch on that because I feel I should discuss that in a separate video because it's so in depth. The short end summary of it is, over time, people have the memory of certain pains and certain wounds that really don't belong to that person. And what can happen is, especially when you have families over time, for example, when you have anxiety, if you have parents that have anxious tendencies, then their children, they learn behaviors that fall in line with anxiety. Thus, naturally, they develop anxieties of their own. And so when you're trying to work through your own issues, being able to stop and say, okay, whenever I'm having this negative self-thought, is this really me, or is this something that someone else projected onto me? Oftentimes, family members unknowingly can project their own insecurities onto their children. And so as you become an adult, we have to unlearn some of those insecurities that may not necessarily belong to us. So for example, if your parent has always considered themselves to always look fat or ugly, or they have body dysmorphia of some kind, every time they look in the mirror, they're always talking about how bad they look. So whenever you were a child, maybe they were making comments about the way you dressed, the way you looked. Oh, you gained so much weight, or you need to lose more weight, or that dress looks ugly on you. You're never going to find a spouse if you look that way. Things like that are internalized from another person's insecure state. Now, there may be events that happen in your life that may cultivate and add to that dysmorphia or that particular wound over time. However, because it was initiated to you as a child when you don't know any better, you're developing and growing, and plus it's already in your family system. In order to be able to heal from that wound, you have to be able to recognize, where did the source come from? So another example would be, think of anxiety, where you always think that, well, I'm just too stupid. That's one that I always dealt with, especially growing up, was I would always sit there and think, man, I'm just so dumb. Why don't I understand things right away? And I would always have that negative voice telling me that I wasn't good enough. I wasn't enough for da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And what I found was, whenever you're talking to that inner voice and trying to get information from it, what really assisted me was pausing and asking, does this voice belong to me? And now what happens whenever you do this is you'll usually feel something in your gut. It's kind of amazing how people that, even if you're not an intuitive or you're not someone that's very good with that inner work, there's a deep inner knowing and feeling that you get whenever something's right and something's wrong. And so especially when it comes to inner voices, if you ask yourself, hey, does this voice actually belong to me? You'll know if it does or if it doesn't. That's the first step you should be doing whenever you're trying to work through an inner conflict, is being able to determine if that's something externally from someone else or your own. It really makes a difference, because if you find out, hey, all this negative self-talk doesn't actually belong to me. It was a wound that maybe a parent had. Maybe it was another relative that I either genetically inherited from, or just from witnessing people around me. You know, I picked up on it because something about it related to me. Once you're able to identify it and understand that it doesn't belong to you, you can give that pain and that negative thought pattern back to someone else. You can't imagine how much time you waste sitting there talking to yourself in a negative tone and with all these different insecurities when half of them probably don't even belong to you. Some of you may be sitting there thinking, why am I so hard about myself on this? I never did anything wrong. I have proof that I'm smart. I have proof that I can do things, or I look good and people tell me I look good all the time. All those different types of things. And so if you are noticing that kind of trend where your negative thought pattern does not align with the things you're seeing outside of you, that's the first question you should be asking is, does it even belong to me? And if it doesn't belong to you, give it back to them. There is so much relief in finally understanding that, oh, all this negative self-hate wasn't even me attacking myself. How crazy is that? You have voices inside your head that you have voices and patterns inside your head that all it took was just taking a step back and remembering who you are and being able to distinguish that can allow it to stop plaguing your mind. Swear to God, it seems really simple. It seems too good to be true, but it's real. I've done it multiple times, and I've done it with other people, especially when I'm talking with friends when they're sitting there talking about like, man, I'm just really not good enough, or like, man, that person's never gonna like me. And I sit there and ask, okay, was that you saying that, or was that maybe, you know, what your mom said about you 3 years ago, or when you were feeling really insecure in middle school? Just saying, it really does work. So sometimes, you know, just taking a sheet of paper and writing that out too, that's another way to just get it out of your head and to visualize it. That's another thing when it comes to doing any type of inner work. What often gets people stuck on doing any type of inner work is you're so stuck in your head that you're not able to see yourself clearly. And this happens to everybody. It doesn't matter how smart you are or how long you've been doing this type of work. This is why we oftentimes seek external validation, because it's our way of being able to say, okay, how does my brain and how does my thought patterns and form of reality mirror to those that are outside of me? Now, there's a correlation, because naturally, if you are dealing with something and you are making decisions to what's familiar to you, the world you build around you is going to directly mirror and impact your internal world, right? However, there's still things that are different than you, because obviously your external world does not always match your internal world. For example, if you're in a dating relationship and your partner doesn't do something that you want them to do, that's because they are a separate entity to you. And that's why looking at that external world is important, because that's how you grow. That's how you learn and validate, is this a correct pattern that I should be repeating or not? And so when it comes to internal work, doing any type of either visualization, or this is why writing things down is always recommended, because being able to take something that is invisible, not concrete, not solid, and taking it out and putting it in a physical space is super important. So I know for those of you, if journaling is not your thing, or you have a hard time writing, or you just get bored, or you don't have the focus, there are other methods that will allow you to release your words and your reality out into the world. For example, starting a YouTube channel, or just recording yourself talking with video. Sometimes that speaking is really important, to just go back and watch yourself and how you project outwards. I highly recommend that to really anyone, because as much as journaling is nice, something about seeing yourself in a video and actually seeing you yourself is really, really powerful and really insightful for seeing how you present out externally. Because I know for sure my internal world does not match what people perceive outside of me. And that's something I'm continually working on, is being able to make sure that who I am on the inside and who my thoughts and my feelings are connected and congruent with my actions and what I present externally to myself. And so having that ability to communicate with the outside is also super important for working through inner conflicts. Another piece of that is how you're able to ask for help. Everybody needs help sometime, now and again. I don't care how cool you are. I don't care how powerful you are, how independent you are, how strong, how smart, blah, blah, blah. The moment you say that I don't need anybody else, I don't need any other help, that's automatically a problem. because what ends up happening is it causes you to build barriers between you and the world around you, and you are never always going to be correct. You're never always going to be able to protect yourself on your own. And while, yeah, great, it's great to be independent, at the end of the day, you will succeed way more and have healthier relationships and a healthier life when you're able to have those interpersonal relationships. That's something I always struggled with, is because I would go the hyper-independence route. And that's why, I avoided social media. I avoided people because I thought, well, I'm dealing with my problems, and either one, people aren't going to accept me, two, people aren't going to understand, three, I'm going to get left behind, I'm going to get hurt again. The list goes on and on. And what ultimately I learned was, even though sometimes you make mistakes and you do things that people won't like and you'll lose friends, but at the end of the day, part of living is having that experience of going out and interacting with people, having those relationships, making those mistakes. And ultimately, you will eventually find those people you're looking for. Now, what I'm not saying is go out there and just, bare your chest to everybody and, I'm bulletproof and go out there and be Wonder Woman, because that's not realistic for anybody. And you shouldn't be that way, because there are societal expectations that you have to somewhat adhere to whenever it comes to fitting into a society. I'm sorry, there's a lot of people that try to be like, oh, well, I'm weird, so I shouldn't fit in, and all this other stuff. And I have to fundamentally disagree with that, because there's a difference between being weird and not being held accountable for doing things that make people uncomfortable or blatantly wrong or whatever. But that's a morality type discussion that I'll discuss elsewhere. At the end of the day, I hope you guys know what I generally mean when I say that, because I'm not saying that, every social outcast, needs to change their life and fit in. I'm trying to talk about general expectations that, hey, murder is bad. We shouldn't be killing people. Or, hey, stealing people's shit is wrong, or doing things like that. Core basic values, which the reason I bring that up is because we're reaching a point in society right now where we're really starting to reevaluate and question what's kind of a society we want to look at, and we're kind of forgetting that perspective of why we have interpersonal relationships and why society is important for our own sustainability, and why being able to have relationships and taking care of people and having empathy outside of ourselves is super important. There's a lot of people right now that don't understand fundamentally why sometimes you have to sacrifice things that benefit everybody as opposed to just you and your own individuality. And there's a huge difference between freedom and giving something up that's short term that benefits everybody. All right, so another piece when it comes to this inner conflict. So you've already taken the time to determine what is you and what is potentially another person. So you've identified that, okay, this feeling, maybe it's like a inner self-loathing of some kind, or a depression, or maybe it's a fear. So the next part is practicing radical honesty. So everybody has generally grown up with some kind of an understanding of how they view lies and honesty. In general, people are taught whenever they're growing up that lies are bad and telling the truth is good. However, as we get older, we find that the world is a little bit more complicated than just telling people exactly how you feel. For example, if you find that someone walks out of a department store dressed looking completely ridiculous and you don't like that look, you can't just sit there and tell them, oh my God, you look so ugly. And while some people, they're okay with having that level of honesty, in general, most people would consider it rude for you to just blatantly put your opinion out there and potentially hurt the other person's feelings. That interpersonal relationship wants to be sustained, because especially if it's your friend, you don't want to hurt your friend's feelings, even if you think they look a little ridiculous. You don't have to sit there and say, oh my God, that's the ugliest thing. You can find kinder ways of being able to say it, or make it into a joke, or show them that, like, hey, I don't really like your outfit, but I really do love and appreciate you anyway, and I'm proud of you for going out and just being yourself. That's a very different tone of voice as opposed to being just judgmental and attacking someone else. However, when it comes to our internal world, radical honesty is fundamentally necessary in order to get to the truth of who you are and how you feel. Oftentimes, in order for us to have relationships with other people, we have to lie sometimes, whether it be lying to ourselves about what we want and what we think, or it could be you're too afraid of your own inner truth or don't understand your own truth, so you have to lie in order to be able to fit in and survive in a social function. So, whenever you're trying to look internally, it's very easy to lie to yourself about the things that you see. That's part of the reason why working on yourself is so fundamentally difficult. It goes inherently against what we were taught value-wise growing up as children. Socially, we think it's unacceptable to steal. So you tell your child if they're trying to steal cookies out of the cookie jar, you're going to tell them that no, stealing is bad and you must ask for a cookie. You shouldn't just take it out of there because, again, it upsets that social relationship. So fundamentally, we learn that, okay, if I steal, there's going to be a negative consequence to my actions. Whenever doing internal work, though, you have to be able to observe the behavior and your actual true emotional state to fundamentally understand why you stole, why you wanted to steal, and what's causing you to make that decision. And then finally, what are your feelings about the consequences of your actions? Do you actually care about if your mom gets mad at you for stealing the cookies? Or are you just going to blow her off and do it anyway? This is what fundamentally leads to, when you look at some mental disorders where, for example, if you're very resistant to authority or different patterns like that, it kind of comes back to that relationship of not being able to fundamentally understand that, hey, I shouldn't steal because there's a beneficial relationship here. Even though I want that cookie, it's better for me if I wait because then I can get one and have a sustained relationship with my parents that's healthy and happy rather than just doing what I want, hurting everybody, and then thus it have negative consequences coming back on me. This is part of also what happens with narcissism. So people often talk about narcissism. Usually the narcissist is always the asshole, and I really hate when everyone sits there and says like, oh, well, we all have a little bit of narcissism. No, that's not how that works, okay? A narcissist is a narcissist, and if you've ever interacted with an actual narcissist, a lot of what is being misconstrued here is with a narcissist, due to inner wounds that are so... Due to their own inner wounding, it's prevented them from being able to see good from the external, and that's why they appear so selfish, because they believe that everything outside of them is untrue, going to hurt them, and so that causes them to overinflate their ego on the inside and causes that negative balance relationship. When you look at narcissism that way, it's a lot easier to understand their behavior rather than just saying, oh, this toxic asshole is just being an asshole. It's like, well, no shit, but everyone is capable of being an asshole, including victims of narcissists who subconsciously can also take on their patterns if they're not paying attention. So that's how narcissism is continued in family systems. So in order to break from the pattern, you have to have that realistic view of yourself and view the pattern separate from the emotional attachment. That emotional attachment is what causes you to distort your inner honesty about how you actually feel about your actions and how you actually feel about your inner conflict. So say, for example, back to that, let's go back to that anxiety example of saying, oh man, I'm not good enough. I'm just, I'm terribly stupid and I just, never understand anything, or I end up not getting anything right. The reality is if you should be honest with yourself, you should be able to observe that inner conflict. You should be able to observe that inner conflict and see it without the emotional negative reaction of what other people would think about your behavior. So say, for example, you make a mistake on your math test and you end up failing your test. Look at all the external voices here that would tell you, oh, well, you didn't study, you're lazy, ... This is the reason why you failed your test, and this is why you're bad, because you failed. You should have succeeded when you could have, but you didn't. Or, let's catch it on the flip side and make it a little more interesting. Maybe you passed your test, but it didn't meet your expectations. So, even even though you didn't fail your test, you're still having that negative reaction toward yourself, and you're constantly putting yourself down, even though the basic expectation was met. However, your expectations or the expectations of someone externally to you were not met. This is where radical honesty comes in. This is where being able to take a step back and take the emotion that you were feeling, so that resentment, that frustration of not being good enough, all those negative emotions, being able to set them to the side and say, be honest with yourself. One, do you actually care if you pass this test? What does the test actually mean to you? Do you have proof of the fact that you are smart enough to do things on your own? And does it really matter if you're smart or not? Like, be honest with yourself. Do you actually care about being that smart, or are you just telling yourself that, oh, I have to be this person because this is what my parents want, this is what my spouse wants, this is what my friends want, or this is what I want for myself, but I can never seem to achieve? Now, with the previous examples of external folks, that's a little bit easier to be able to undo that knot because it doesn't belong to you. Maybe you're just content with being able to say, hey, I didn't pass the test, but I'm comfortable with who I am, and I just need to let go of my thoughts towards other people. Now, if you're a perfectionist, on the other hand, you have a certain expectation that you have set for yourself, and whenever you don't meet that expectation, you're immediately putting yourself down because you're not in line with where you want to be. And this is where radical honesty needs to come into play. When it comes to radical honesty, you have to be brave enough to be able to admit to yourself, one, am I capable of even achieving that vision that I have for myself? It's one thing to motivate yourself because you want to be better and better and better, and that's really good. But at the end of the day, you also have to accept who you are right now, because otherwise you're going to keep making yourself miserable. And if those expectations are not within your realistic limits, then you won't be able to exceed the limits that you can surpass and shut down before you even begin to reach that step. This is very common with high achieving people, where they're so dead focused on fulfilling what they can do, and they know that they have extended limits beyond what your average person is. However, at the end of the day, people do still have their limits, and part of growth is being able to determine where those realistic limits lie, but being able to still accept yourself at the same time. That radical honesty of being able to say, listen, I am not capable of this, or I don't have to get an A on every single math test to be successful. I don't have to be good at every single step of the way in order to achieve and do what I need to do. What is your real actual goal when you're trying to be hard on yourself? Is it your own happiness? Is it someone else's happiness? Is it achieving a goal? Like, be truly honest with yourself about what you're actually trying to achieve, because you'll come to find out that there's a lot of negativity inside your head that has no true value towards achieving your goal, as well as it just puts yourself down. And if you're not able to sit and ask those questions, sometimes people have a hard time being able to ask yourself, well, why do I feel this way? Why do I do these things? And if you immediately say, well, that's not good enough answer, you're never going to be honest with yourself, and you're never going to grow. You're never going to be able to have better interpersonal relationships, especially with yourself, if you're not able to set a place and say, hey, whatever answer you give me, it's okay. If I sit there and if I'm honest with myself and I ask myself, hey, why did I not study for the test when I knew I should have? And if I'm being truly honest with myself, part of it could be, honestly, I don't give a shit about this test because I've got all these other difficult things going on in my life that I don't have the capacity to do it. Or two, maybe this is not a subject that I honestly want to do. Three, maybe I don't know how to study, or I don't know how to set myself up for success. Or three, I just didn't want to. If your answer is, I just didn't want to, but you don't want to be honest with yourself, you're never going to be able to find out what you actually want to do if you're not able to let go of that negative inner thinking and say, hey, just let me be how I want to be. And that takes a lot of inner work to be able to determine what is something that is good for you and what's a good attitude, and what is something that is just You got to work on it a little bit. It's a constant battle, and I think people oftentimes, if you're trying to work on yourself, it's really easy to get into the pattern of constantly trying to fix everything. Be like, okay, well, I have a shortcoming here, then I need to work on this, or I have a shortcoming here, da-da-da-da-da. But like that part of process improvement, you need to stop and be able to enjoy the process as well, and understand that if you don't make it, it doesn't mean you're a terrible person. It doesn't mean you're not capable of achieving things. Or maybe you can't even get yourself out of bed in the morning and, whatever, your life is your life. The only thing that you can live up to and achieve is who you actually are and who you're supposed to be and want to be. Because ultimately, if you keep trying to be someone else you don't want to be, you're just going to keep failing no matter what. And it just causes so much unnecessary stress and drama that you don't need in your life. And you waste a lot of time. I know I seriously have. And so being able to have that radical honesty with yourself and creating a place will allow wounds to be easier. It will allow you to be able to heal wounds a lot easier, because once you have that side of you that is able to say, hey, I have these really dark thoughts. I have these really, weird patterns. I have these da-da-da-da-da-da-da-das, all those dark little demons that are inside of you. You're never going to be able to see them if you don't. You're never going to be able to see them and work on them until you take a step back and just say, hey, whoever I am, I am. I can't change. I can't hide from me and only me. I am the only person that's supposed to know my demons, own my demons, and I make choices of what I do with them. I make choices of what I do with my negative voice. I make choices what I do with allowing other people in my life and what they do to me. And you can't achieve that without that radical honesty. And quite frankly, it's hard, especially if you're sitting there especially if you're not sure what's going on inside of you. Or maybe you kind of are and you're afraid of it. And I'm just here to tell you right now that I don't care how dark your demons are. You have to be honest with yourself in order to be able to get a grip on them and being able to have a balanced life, because no one is perfect. No one is pure. In order to be the best person you need to be, getting rid of your demons is not going to solve it. It's being able to learn to live with them and being able to live with that, have them live, in order to have them live side by side with your good side. Okay, so now you've already gone through and taken the time to create a space where you can just be honest with all those voices going on inside of you. You know what is probably tied to something in childhood or maybe tied to something else. You're able to identify, what is actually going on, what you're truly feeling. And now you're able to create an honest space for yourself. The next piece of it is actually able to identify what is the true conflict. One of the hardest parts about improving anything is being able to correctly identify a problem. So sometimes what ends up happening, for example, if you're trying to fix a computer, say that a software is not working, you keep clicking the X button and it just will never shut off. In order to fix the problem, you have to identify the correct problem. If you're sitting there thinking that the problem is just, oh, I need to install the software again. If you're just looking at something from surface level symptoms, sometimes there's just real basic general solutions that comes to those problems. Think about with a computer, where if your software is not working, sometimes it's as easy as just restart the computer and then see if it works again. Turn your phone off on and on, see if it works again. Those are just some general high-level solutions. However, you can't take that approach when it comes to a lot of inner work, because the human brain is complicated and you have a lot of experiences in life. Now, granted, when it comes to dealing with some inner conflicts, this is why getting a therapist involved would be really useful to you, so that way getting a trained professional that's able to really accurately dive in and help you with your specific problem is useful, because you have someone that's trained in it. However, for your own purposes and your own work, it's really important to be able to identify what that real conflict is, and part of that healing process is finding that conflict in the first place. So A simple example of what I'm talking about is, say, for example, every time you go to the grocery store, you get upset for some reason. You go in there and you become anxious and you're not able to really focus on getting your groceries like you're supposed to. So then you leave and then you start to avoid that grocery store because you're not understanding what exactly is going on. So immediately your first thought is, oh, well, I'm afraid of the grocery store. Or something in the grocery store frightens me. So for my example, if you identify that the grocery store is what causes you stress, that's a surface level problem to something that's going on much deeper inside of you. And the best way to be able to determine if that's really the problem, if the grocery store is the problem, or if it's a wound or triggering from something else, the first step that you need to do is ask yourself, well, why? What exactly am I feeling? And why is this causing me this type of pain? So maybe you're at the grocery store and you identify that, well, maybe it's something about the environment in the grocery store that makes me really upset. Or maybe it's the people, it's a little too claustrophobic. And then you can go, okay, well, if I'm feeling claustrophobic and I really don't like the changes that are going on in the store, what exactly about that change makes me upset? Well, okay, I can sit there and think to myself, I don't know, change makes me feel really unsafe because I'm not able to directly identify what I need when I need it, and it means I have to think a little bit harder, or I get anxious because I'm not sure what's happening next. And so you can kind of see where I'm going with it, is like asking those questions and being able to dive deeper and deeper and deeper, and then come to find out that really it's not the grocery store that is causing you to become upset. It's change and being afraid of not being able to identify a safe place whenever you're going into a new environment. That's a very different problem that can be fixed as opposed to the grocery store. Because with the grocery store, if you're naturally just thinking with only that information, your thought is, well, I just won't go to that grocery store ever again, which, quite honestly, that's not really a good use of your time, especially when there's plenty of grocery stores out there that will change on a constant basis. There's plenty of other places in life that life is constantly changing. It's really hard to have a healthy and happy life if you're constantly avoiding every single time you become upset and become triggered. So instead, being able to identify what that problem is will help you on your healing path and being able to actually be able to heal it, as opposed to just dealing with surface level problems. And again, I'm going to reiterate that while this is something that I'm recommending to you as stuff I've figured out throughout the years, I've gone to therapy myself, and I recommend people should go whenever you're dealing with specific problems. Having that other person is really important to help you with identify. And I say specifically a therapist, because as much as people like to say, oh, well, my spiritual leader is a therapist, or this other person, I'm saying specifically a therapist, because therapy is not about just talking. And another piece of actually making therapy treatment useful is actually being able to identify what your problem is so you can find the right therapist. Right now there is a very big misunderstanding of how therapy works and what therapy is about. Sitting and talking about your problems is not necessarily the goal of what therapy is, because if that were the case, everyone talks about their issues all the time. Therapy is specifically guided, and depending on the type of therapy treatments that are appropriate for you, talking may not be enough to be able to get you to the root of your problem in the first place. And a lot of people are more traumatized than they realized. I hate to break it to y'all, but it turns out that your anxiety and your depression, everyone identifies the surface level feelings, but really there's a lot deeper traumas that come as a result. Anxiety and depression are surface level symptoms of sometimes bigger things, depending on what your situation is. And especially if you had traumas in childhood, you probably have more than just anxiety and depression. So, bearing that in mind, correctly identifying the conflict is super useful when you're trying to heal yourself. So that way you can understand, hey, is this just me feeling insecure about something that someone said to me 5 years ago? Or is this rooted in a deeper childhood trauma that needs a little bit more healing work and more guidance to being able to unroot and be able to resolve and affect my day-to-day living? Because Here's another aspect that you might not consider is when you're having a particular wound or type of trauma, it tends to repeat in other areas of your life, specifically work, specifically with interpersonal relationships, with how you do tasks. There's a certain thought pattern that you get stuck in whenever you have a certain negative pattern, and being able to identify and heal one pattern will help multiple areas of your life. So that's why it's super important when, for example, if you're trying to attract a boyfriend or a girlfriend and you're finding that, man, I have a lot of issues with attracting the right person. Bear in mind, you might be having the same problem that is preventing you from getting your relationships that's affecting you in your workplace. Maybe it's your anxiety. Maybe it's the way you're thinking about how people tell you things and how you internalize that. There's all kinds of things that can be a part of it. And again, that's why I'm saying when it comes to working on yourself, if you're not comfortable with working on yourself and having those inner dialogues, talking to someone and getting help from another person is super critical, so that way you can know what's you and what's not you and what's, getting caught in the mess. I know I'm kind of in the weeds here, but that's, again, the importance of interpersonal relationships, is they're there as reflections to teach you more about yourself. Now, I'm not saying that for every problem you need to go and talk to a therapist or talk to a friend or spiritual healer or whatever. There needs to be a balance of both. You have to be doing your work inside as well as outside in order to achieve real results. You wouldn't believe how many times I see people that they go and they take medication for their mental illness, and then they come back and they're like, man, I'm just not feeling better. And like, well, no shit, because if you're not taking the time to work on your inner issues and having those discussions and that internal healing process, then what good does medication do? I mean, medication affects your chemical balance inside of your head, but at the end of the day, the reason why you are experiencing these symptoms is because there's something deeper there. And this is kind of getting into more of the spiritual side of things, is like there's the biological reasons why you're dealing with mental health issues, but there's also the spiritual sides. And you have to be able to unify both of them when you're trying to address healing these problems. And to neglect one and not the other really does you a disservice. But that's also why, again, correctly identifying your conflict is super important, because if you try to spend all this time thinking, oh, I've got anxiety, and every time you go to these places that they're anxiety focused and you don't get better, well, then clearly you don't have anxiety. Being able to identify when it comes to anxiety, that's a surface level symptom, and then you find out, oh, maybe I actually have PTSD and just handle it differently. Or, being able to find out those different pieces, you're going to waste a whole bunch of time on things that don't work, and then you just give up. And so that's why, when it comes to this inner work, it's so complicated. And some of you, I can already feel probably watching this video, getting overwhelmed and going, oh my God, how the hell am I supposed to identify all this, or how am I able to figure it out? And I'm going to go back to some of my previous statements and say, this is why you need to create a space for yourself to be radically honest and being willing to just say, hey, this is what it is. This is what the problem is. And in order to heal this problem, you're going to make mistakes. You're going to identify things wrong, and you're going to, not meet your expectations. And that's part of the healing process too. And if you're being so hard on yourself for not being able to heal, that's part of the problem as well, is understanding that you are where exactly you need to be, and not everything's going to be healed right away. You're not going to have all of the inner answers, and it takes years to work on this stuff. So just take it one baby step at a time. You're not going to get healed overnight, hun. You're not going to be able to work through everything perfectly, or you're always going to turn out to be, oh, everything's going to look perfect and I'm always going to be able to be happy every day and whatnot. That's unrealistic, and that's not what true healing is. This is a great segue into kind of my last point that really kind of summarizes healing from inner conflict. Healing from inner conflict and finding who you are again is having that self-compassion. With all those things that I just told you about and all of those different moving pieces of working on yourself, self-compassion is fundamental for getting you through all of this. Because if you are not compassionate with yourself, it is so much harder to heal yourself when you don't take the time to say, hey, I understand that you're having a hard time, and it's okay. We don't have to be perfect in order for me to love myself. Maybe you made mistakes in the past. Maybe you self-sabotaged. Maybe you self-harmed. Maybe you've almost died. Maybe you're considering dying. It doesn't matter what your state is right now. Self-compassion is fundamental to make sure that no matter what the journey is, you are by your side. And this is another thing too, that what people don't often realize is, especially if you grew up in a home where you were not taught to love yourself, or you weren't receiving love from your parents, you have to teach yourself those skills. People that came from loving homes, or people that came from places that didn't have, or people that came from places that already had that in them, that's a skill that they don't have to work on as hard compared to people that were in homes that maybe it just wasn't like that, or maybe it appeared like self-love, but it really wasn't. It was fake, and it was conditional. Working through those wounds and whatnot, you are responsible for creating that love yourself. And part of that self-compassion is allowing only relationships into your life that benefit you, allowing yourself to cry and be mean and terrible, at least for yourself. Or having self-compassion with yourself, even when you're being mean and terrible, because at the end of the day, you die with just you, not your stuff, not your significant other, not your family, not your cats. It's just you. And so ultimately, you are your own best friend. And if you can't have that self-compassion there, you're never going to get anywhere. There's no healing process and no way out of this without loving yourself. And so part of that self-compassion, is just simple and easy as just saying, okay, I'm not going to attack you today. I'm going to let you feel how you feel, and I'm just going to let it be. I'm not going to say anything. It can be as easy as brushing your teeth in the morning, or getting yourself a nice treat after a long day of work. Or maybe it's just looking in the mirror and telling yourself, I love you. When it comes to inner conflict, it's so easy to get caught up in all these negative voices, and when everything's confusing and life is hard and you're beating yourself down, you got to be your own best friend. It does not matter if you have all the resources in the world or none at all. That self-compassion is critical and key, because someone else may have all the money in the world, they may have, the family and all that stuff, but if they don't love themselves, they're going to lose all of it. And you see examples of that all the time. That's why no matter what's going on, you can't blame your external circumstances if you can cultivate things from within yourself. And I know there's a lot of people that use that as a form of bullshit excuses for getting away with treating people like crap or not helping others. That's a very different conversation. But at the end of the day, it's still true. You have to not take on this victim mentality and be able to say, okay, within the capacity of what I have and the limitations I have and who I actually am, not this idealized version of who I want to be, this is what I can do, and I still love me anyway. And that is a very, very, very difficult thing to do. Because oftentimes our society rewards people to be good, and everyone wants to be that champion that everyone else loves and things like that, or, they want to be the good person and all that stuff, and they think that, oh, well, if I'm standing up for other people, or if I'm doing X, Y, Z and giving all my money away, then that's what makes me good and blah, blah, blah. And while those things are nice, at the end of the day, though, you are not all just good. And you need to be able to love your You need to be able to love your demons too. And unfortunately, what's kind of happened right now, especially with our current culture of public shaming, cancel culture, and different things like that, there's not a lot of room for people to be themselves authentically and be able to learn from mistakes. The moment you shut out your shadow, it becomes worse. This is why we're seeing people going to such extremes to get back at each other, and why these wounds that are coming up from the past are getting more and more inflamed, because at the end of the day, there's no room for healing if people say that there's no room for healing if there's not complete radical honesty about why people are doing what they do, and not being able to see people as human beings rather than just, this is the enemy, us versus them. It's very important, especially when you're dealing with healing with your past, that understanding that a person is a person. They have both good and bad, and even if they hurt you, or even if they helped you, they have both, and it's not your place to cast a judgment on them. They are what they is. That ain't good grammar, but that's the best way for me to describe it. And so lastly, you know, kind of tying all that stuff together, you know, I talked about finding yourself again. How do you find yourself amongst all this confusion? And who do I want to be? And where am I going? Who am I actually underneath all of these wounds and all of these, you know, ideas of who I think I am and who I think I am? It really comes down to will and wanting to actually be yourself, your true, wonderful, beautiful, authentic self. And this is something that, especially when you've been through trauma, and maybe, especially right now, with everything that's going on, a lot of people are getting woken up to the reality that how they've been living life no longer aligns with who they are and what they want things to be. And you have control over your reality. I know everyone says that, but it's absolutely true. And the only way you can learn what that control looks like is being willing to go look for it and being willing to let go of who you think you're supposed to be and who you think other people want you to be. The people that actually love you for who you are will always follow you and find you whatever phase of life you're in. You wouldn't believe how many times in my life I was not in the best place. I was not the best person. And I still had people, sometimes they were strangers, sometimes they were people who knew me, but they showed me love unconditionally. And those were the people that got me through the worst of it and helped me realize, especially now that I've worked on myself and I am a better person. And if people like me now, great. But at the end of the day, I'm responsible for loving me through whatever, regardless of what person I am right now. And that's what you need to understand, is even during your darkest times, even though you don't see them, there's people out there that are cheering for you and sending you love no matter what. You are responsible for being open to receiving it and understanding that even when I make a mistake, it's okay to be loved by another person. It's okay to love myself even despite my mistakes. And for the record, you know, here's some other things that you can tell yourself as a form of self-compassion. It's okay if I'm not ready to heal from this. It's okay if I don't understand what's going on. It's okay if I failed. It's okay because at the end of the day, I'm a human being and that's all I have to be. I don't have to be perfect. I don't have to be loved by everyone. I don't have to be strong every single day. And the only person that needs to be able to see my inner, authentic, true self is me. And no one can take that away from me. No one can take away your authentic self. I know you want love. I know you want a better life for yourself. But you can't get there until you have that conversation with yourself. And it's super hard. And that's why you have to be willing and able to keep trying no matter what. And it's okay if you stop trying for a while. All right? It's hard. It's okay if you give up. It's okay if you fail and you go back to your old patterns. It's okay because eventually you will come back to yourself because nothing in this world is constant but change. And so you get to control the mast. You get to control what direction you go. The only thing that is consistent is you are moving forward regardless of if you want to or not. Even if you die, your atoms and your existence and people's memories will continue on regardless of what you decide. So surrender to the process and just let yourself be. Let yourself be your horrible mess and keep searching. And keep searching for yourself. Because as long as you have that thought in your head, you'll find it. I promise. And I just want... And I just want you guys to know that I'm very proud of you. No matter what place you are in life, I don't have to know what your situation is. I don't have to know what you've done or why you found me today, but all I want to say is I'm proud of you and I love you very much. Because at the end of the day, I don't have to know you to know that we're all in this together, helping each other and supporting each other. The fact that you are watching this video right now is a sign to yourself that you want to find yourself and you are not giving up. Only people that want to go find themselves end up looking for things that will help them find yourself. Even if you don't think you are constantly. And I can, at any point in time, I'll tell you exactly what you're seeing in yourself. And no matter what your depressed voice says, no matter how terrible you think you are or what is going on in your life right now, there are signs of you trying to protect yourself and take care of yourself every single day, even if you can't see it. Making simple little decisions all the time are just little acts showing that you love yourself and you want to continue. And you want to be loved and you have love for yourself. Even if it doesn't look like it and even if it doesn't meet your expectations, it's still there. And I want you to hold on to that while you're going through this journey because we change and we're going to be different. And that's what's so beautiful about being a human being. Maybe it's not always pretty and it's maybe not always what we want it to look like, but at the end of the day, we're us and we can't be anything less than that. I hope you guys got some healing out of this little monologue that I recorded here, and I want you guys to remember one thing: don't be anything less than yourself, no matter what. Warts and all, love and all, light and all that good stuff, everything that you can be and will be, go be it today, and don't let anyone else stop you. I'll see you guys next time. Bye.